Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Bold Take Scouting Podcast. As we've been doing the last few weeks, we're going to have a hot topics episode where we're just going to run through some of the hot topics in the college football world and in the NFL world. And the first one is our recipient of the Defensive Rookie of the Week award. And if you're unfamiliar with that, I'd advise you to go check out our Instagram at Bold Take Scouting. Every week, we give out offensive and defensive Rookie of the Weeks with blurbs for each. You can also interact with other fans in the comment sections. Really fun thing. But Christian Barmore was our winner this week, and he's been having such an impressive rookie season. How do you feel about Barmore's rise and considering how he fell in the draft due to character concerns to the second round to the New England Patriots?
Yeah, I think I'm a little surprised at how quickly he's come on. Part of the reason why I had a high second round grade on him was he was a little bit inconsistent. There were games where he really showed up, really looked like a top 15 talent. There were other games where he was pretty much nowhere to be seen on the field. So for me, that those inconsistencies were reasons that I dropped him to a high second round grade. But he's been very consistent over the start of the season, the first half, first 9 weeks, and I think New England, as we say for a lot of players, was a great place for him to go.
Yeah, and I think you have to consider the connections that Bill Belichick has to New England. Obviously, we know he has a really good relationship with Alabama head coach Nick Saban, and there were a lot of character concerns that were talked about with Barmore. I know I had a late first round grade on him, and I dropped him to the top of the second round because of those. But when I saw Bill Belichick pick him, I thought these can't be that bad. He's got to be really confident that he's going to be able to get Barmore to work his tail off, and that's pretty much what he said post game. Is that Barmore comes in early, stays late, works on his flexibility, his strength, his technique, and he's done better every week, and that's high praise from Bill Belichick. He doesn't give that out too often. Barmore's just a really talented player. I thought he was easily the most talented defensive tackle in this week 2021 draft class at the position, and it looks like it's already paying dividends for the Patriots. So I'm excited to see how he develops there.
Yeah, totally. And I think if we talk about some of his rookie stats, he leads rookies in both hurries and batted passes, which shows that he can both rush the passer and defend the pass, being able to get his hands up when he realizes that the QB is throwing the ball, and that's really underrated stat and talent for defensive tackles of being aware that, oh, the QB is throwing the ball, let me get my hands up, bat that ball down. So I think those are two of the most important stats for a defensive tackle, and he leads rookies in both.
Definitely, and I've been really impressed by his motor too. And that's really good to see from a guy who we saw disappear in stretches last year, but it's definitely been showing up so far in his NFL career. And I think we can move on to another one of the talking points. Last night on Sunday Night Football, we watched the Tennessee Titans 1-1 Rams pretty convincingly, and that without Derrick Henry, who broke his foot and may or may not be coming back at the end of the season. So first, for this stretch without Derrick Henry, are you convinced that the Titans can keep a high level that they showed last night?
I am. I think that their defense, they really proved Sunday night that their defense can stay with the top offenses in the league. I really think the Rams are one of the best offenses in the league. They have one of the best offensive minds. They have one of the best quarterbacks, in my opinion, in the league. And the fact that, they pretty much shut down that Rams offense for most of the night. They have a really good pass rush this year that they didn't have last year. I want to give a shout out to a guy that both of us really liked in the draft process a few years ago, Jeffrey Simmons, who's really been playing really well. I had him as a top 10 talent despite his season-ending injury, and he's really, really showing that, he's living up to that billing.
Yeah, I agree that the defense looks very improved, and they've really helped out the team yesterday. But I think the offense is going to stall while Henry is out. I think he was really the central part of their offensive identity. And yesterday, even though they put up a good point total against the Rams, they had a pick six and another interception in the red zone that set them up for another touchdown. So 14 of their points came pretty much because of the defense. And I just don't think that their offense can be playing consistently enough for them to be playing at this level for the stretch that Henry is out. But that being said, Derrick Henry went down in week 8, and it was said that he was going to miss 6 to 10 weeks. So if you take the middle of that 8 weeks, add that on to week 8, rough estimate, week 16. So it looks like there's a high chance that Henry will be back for the playoffs. And now I think that makes things really interesting because Tennessee's been a team that I've been watching the last couple of years, and heading into the postseason, I always thought, they could go far. They could really surprise people, and it hasn't quite happened yet. But man, I wouldn't be surprised to see them in the AFC Championship game this season.
I just love the way the Titans are built and the way they play. They're super physical. They're the name of their game is we're going to impose our will on you. We're going to make you do what we want you to do. I think you see that with their offensive line, obviously with Derrick Henry, even at wide receiver, A.J. Brown, Julio Jones now. Those are two insanely physical wide receivers. And on that offensive point really quick, I agree. I don't think their offense will be great without Derrick Henry. I think their offense can do enough with how well their defense has played over the past few weeks. If their defense can sustain that, I'm sure they'll take a few losses here and there without Derrick Henry. I think they'll be able to tread water enough to keep themselves in a high seed heading into the playoffs. And I'd assume that Derrick Henry can come back for the playoffs. If I was the Titans, I wouldn't bring him back until then, just because if you don't know, a Jones fracture is a broken fifth metatarsal in your foot, and those are really hard to recover from because the bones are so small and there's lack of blood flow. So if he does hurt it again, that will be a serious issue. I'd hold him off into the playoffs. And it could honestly be good for the Titans in a way. They make it to the playoffs. Derrick Henry's fresh, and we know Derrick Henry is dangerous in the playoffs when all the other teams are getting, hurt, getting tired late in the season, playing, 16, 17, 18, 19 games. And Derrick Henry coming back fresh, if his foot is fully healed, could be scary for opposing defenses.
In the playoffs last year, actually, he really got shut down, though. But I think that we could definitely see that not happening again. I think that was just more really good game plan by the opponent. And the big factor for the Titans this season is that the defense has been looking better, and that was capped off by a really good performance last night against the Rams. So I would put the Titans up there as one of the teams with a real chance at having an AFC Championship berth. And I'm excited to see what happens and when Derrick Henry does come back. And now transitioning to the college football scene, we had a matchup of future potential first round picks at the quarterback position between Matt Corral and his Ole Miss team and Liberty's Malik Willis. And neither quarterback looked great. Malik Willis looked pretty bad with 0 touchdowns and 3 interceptions on just 173 yards passing, and didn't really get that much going on the ground either, despite 27 carries. And I haven't gotten a chance to watch the game. I know you haven't either, but I just thought we should address it and talk about how much will weigh just one game into the evaluation factor, because I think that I still have to watch the game, as I said, but playing that poorly against what's really the only good team on Liberty's weak schedule is really concerning to me, and it's bound to play a significant role in my evaluation of Willis.
Yeah, definitely. I think, you always want to take the games where quarterbacks are playing the highest level of competition into account the most, because, that's the closest to the talent level they'd be playing within the NFL. The thing you do have to be careful with evaluating Willis in this game is Liberty's a lot less talented team overall than Ole Miss. I'm not making any excuses for Willis. He had an awful stat line. Again, I haven't watched the game. For all I know, those 3 picks could all have been tipped. I know that they weren't, though. But we'll have to watch the tape in detail to get really get the sense of how bad he played and how poorly some of those balls were. But you have to take into account, but you also have to step back and say he's playing with worse competition. He may have just been trying to do too much. He must have said, or he could have said, I have to put this game on my back. I have to do everything I can to win because I know no one else on this team will be able to step up. So that's another factor to think about as well. Obviously, you don't want to judge a QB by one game. Everybody has bad games. So I think we'll be comparing how he played in this game versus Ole Miss with, the rest of the games that he played this season.
it's going to be difficult for me to believe in a quarterback who I have not seen have a good game against a top level college football team. And I think that that's just a blatant uh, mark on his resume right now.
What if he, because Liberty, I don't know if they're guaranteed to get in a bowl yet. What if they go to a bowl game, they play a talented team, and he plays well?
Well, I think that that would do a lot for me. And their next game is also against Louisiana, which is a ranked team. And I think I need to see him bounce back and have a good game because right now, the only other ranked team that they have played is Ole Miss, and we saw how he played. So I think he really needs to bounce back against Louisiana. But I think now we can move on to another one of the hot topics in college football is Ohio State sophomore wide receiver Jackson Smith and Jigba totaling a record-breaking 15 receptions along with 240 yards and a touchdown. And I am not surprised, quite honestly, because I've never scouted just him, but watching Justin Fields tape over and over again last year, and then watching both Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson, the other Ohio State receivers this summer, I kept seeing Smith and Jigba. I looked him up, found out he was a 5-star recruit, and man, I think that this is a coming out game for him, and it's a sign of things to come in the future because he's a really talented wide receiver. And next year, when Olave and Wilson are out, I think that, and he's a junior who will be draft eligible the following spring, he can really make some splashes. And right now, while Garrett Wilson is out with injury, it's definitely big for Ohio State that he's stepping up this way.
Yeah, like you said, I haven't scouted him by himself, but seeing him in Justin Fields tape, Chris Olave tape, Garrett Wilson tape, he really jumps off the screen. I, what came to me immediately was I remember a specific play watching Justin
Yep.
Fields tape. You know exactly what I'm talking. He made an insanely acrobatic catch in the back of the end zone. I want
Against Nebraska.
Nebraska. Yeah. Okay.
Nebraska last year,
And
yeah.
if you haven't seen that, go watch it. It is insanely impressive. Um, but I mean, I agree with what you said. From what I've seen from him so far, he could definitely be in contention for wide receiver one next season. And I just want to bring up really quickly. We talked about Olave returning to school at the beginning of this season and said we were a little confused by it because we weren't sure how much he could up his draft stock. Regardless of what we think about his tape this year, I think he has upped his draft stock. I think he's played very well, and I know he's being talked about very highly in circles. So maybe he did make the right decision returning to school.
Yeah, and I think he also must have evaluated the talent of the wide receiver position. Last wide receiver class was absolutely stacked, and there were guys ahead of him that he had no shot of passing. Jamar Chase, Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle. These guys were getting some top 10 grades around the league. And now I think this is still a good wide receiver class. It's really deep, and there's a handful of guys that could potentially earn first round grades from me, but there's no top tier talent, and so he isn't really being blocked by several top wide receivers in the class. So that must have factored into this decision too. And now we're seeing, I don't know if he'll end up being my wide receiver one. I feel like he probably won't be, but a lot of people do have him there. So I think you're right. He made the right decision, and he's definitely improving his draft stock. And hey, there's also, it's not just about draft stock. His team is squarely in the mix to go to the college football playoff and have a shot at a championship. So that's got to have been part of the deciding factor too.
Yeah, totally. And I think we'll move on to our last topic now. Some of the individual games from last week in college football. We'll start off with Purdue beating Michigan State, who we talked about last week when the first playoff rankings came out. And I mean, this was just a blow to Michigan State's playoff chances.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not too surprised. I think that they were riding an emotional high against Michigan, and Purdue was really a trap game. I know both of us had the chance to watch Purdue in person this year, and Purdue's a really talented team with some real playmakers. I know David Bell, the wide receiver, is a guy that people are giving day 2 grades to, and I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up going in that range. A really talented playmaker, and just top to bottom, they've got some great players. The defense has several studs like George Karlaftis and Jalen Alexander. And so I'm just not that surprised. And now I'm interested to see how Purdue plays Ohio State, because that's coming up this Saturday. And we saw Ohio State wasn't too convincing against Nebraska this past week. And the other game that ended up being really way closer than we thought it would was Cincinnati against Tulsa. Cincinnati almost blew the game by fumbling at their own 1 yard line. And so Tulsa had 4 tries from the 1 yard line, down 8 to get in. It was ended up being a really weird series of events. I know the Tulsa quarterback ended up sliding short of the goal line instead of getting in. And if he had simply just gone into the end zone, it would have been they would have been a 2 point conversion away from overtime. And it's definitely unsettling to see Cincinnati play a team like Tulsa that close, a team with a losing record in a non Power Five conference, and I don't think the committee is going to be liking that either. So, a win's a win, and Cincinnati's undefeated. But if they want to make the playoff, I think they have to be winning games by more than slim margins against these teams that are just of lower competition.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's unfortunate because, I want to see Cincinnati in the top four. I want to see them in the playoffs because I feel like they deserve it. After the past few years that they've put together, they've shown that they're one of the best teams in the country. This is not how they're going to make that happen. I mean, winning by 8 against Tulsa, like you said, as a non-Power 5 team with a losing record, just, gives the committee even more reason to say, nope, Cincinnati doesn't deserve it. So I think it's really unfortunate. And it really sucks to all the people that wanted to see Cincinnati in the top four and in the playoffs. Not saying it can't happen, but in order for that to happen, like you said, they have to be winning these games by 20 points.
Yeah.
I mean, they have to show that they are completely dominating these lower level teams.
Yeah, there definitely can't be a close game for the remainder of the season for Cincinnati, I think, if they're going to have a shot to get in. And I think that wraps up our episode today.
Yeah, so it was short, but a few important topics that we wanted to talk about. Thanks, everyone, for listening, tuning in. We'll be back with another episode next week.